Hey, thanks for tuning into today's show. Now, today's a special show because we're talking about something that I believe that you haven't heard before, but it has a deep effect on your leadership. In fact, a lot of leaders don't think that they deal with this challenge, but a lot of them do. And I'm going to give you a lot of stories and a lot of examples of how leaders, big and small, of all levels and different sectors, have dealt with this particular issue over and over and over again. And I'm going to give you some specific tools on how to deal with it. Hey, welcome to the Dan Owolabi Podcast. It's good to have you back again. Now, I'm excited about today's episode because we're talking specifically about something that I think, in fact, I almost guarantee that no one told you about before you became a leader. Whether you've been leading for a few hours, a few days, a few weeks, or a few decades, I guarantee you that you had an idea of what leadership was like, and then you got into it, and it was completely different. People didn't tell you about this thing. Now, the truth is, when you get into leadership for the first time, you have an idea of what it's going to be about. You think about maybe the office or the salary or the fact that you'll have direct reports, or you get to finally get out from under someone else's thumb and you get to build what you want to build, or you get to lead the team that you want to lead, or you get to do the things that you want to do. And you think about all the things, and you know it's not going to be as easy as you think it's going to be. But here's the thing that oftentimes gets you. Here's the thing that you often miss, and you're experiencing it right now, or you've learned how to deal with it. It's this idea of isolation, the idea of loneliness that comes with leadership, the loneliness of being in charge. That's something that oftentimes never gets talked about. Not when you get a degree, not when you're sitting underneath someone, not when you're about to get into leadership, and when you're in the seat, oftentimes you feel it in a real profound way. We're going to talk about that today. Now, the thing is, you're not the only one that's ever experienced this. This is a widespread phenomenon within leadership circles all over the globe, from Costa Rica to Croatia, from Uganda to Ukraine. Leaders all over the world have dealt with it, and within branches worldwide, we talk about this on a regular basis, how to handle this. The truth is, for you and for me, we're not the only ones that have ever dealt with this. In fact, one of the best leaders I've ever heard of, one of the best leaders I've ever followed, dealt with this acutely. One of my favorite stories is from a guy named John Maxwell. Now, some of you might be familiar with John. Some of you might not be familiar with John, but he's known around the world as the foremost leadership expert, written over 90 books over the course of 40 years. Absolutely incredible leader, inspired me, inspired a lot of people. But here's the thing about John. Years before he became who people know him to be, he was just starting out in leadership. And he got a really fast start. One of the things that happened to him early on was that he was a pastor, and he was the youngest person to lead a church in his denomination past the 1,000 person mark. No one else had ever done that. He was one of the first people to change the name of the church within the denomination, which, you know, if you're familiar with Christianity and old school denominations, changing the name is a big freaking deal. He was one of the first and the youngest to do it. He had milestone after milestone, first one to write a book, first one to start speaking on different stages. He had all these milestones as a very young leader. And one of the things that he found was that he expected, get this expectation gap, he expected the more that he accomplished, the more applause he would get, the more people wanted to seek his advice, figure out why he was doing it so well, figure out what the secret sauce was. He expected to get applause as he continued to grow as a leader. But what he found wasn't applause. What he found was isolation. In fact, the better he got as a leader, the more isolated and lonely he felt. In fact, he says very specifically, in fact, the better I got as a leader, the more I succeeded, the fewer people celebrated. That was shocking for him because he thought that leadership, specifically high-level leadership, wouldn't automatically lead to disconnection. He didn't think that leadership would lead to isolation, but yet that's where he found himself. What's interesting about that is that that's not just John's story. That's the story of countless leaders. In fact, I dare you to find one leader that hasn't risen quickly in the ranks and experienced deep isolation. It's a shocking and surprising thing. Now, here's the good news. It doesn't have to be the end of the story. It doesn't mean that that's automatic. It doesn't mean that it has to be exactly how it is, but it is something that almost every single leader has felt at one point or another. Deep, real isolation. Oftentimes, loneliness. Now, when you're thinking about isolation and leadership, here's the first thing you got to understand. You got to understand why power reduces honest feedback. It's not you. It's not your personality. It's not the fact that, people are looking at you, and they don't like you as a person. They don't want to hang out with you. It's not that. It's your position. Power by itself reduces honest feedback. One of my favorite studies from 1972 talks specifically about how subordinates in the workplace tend to lose their sense of free will when they start interacting with their boss. Their feeling of just being around them means that they don't have the freedom to just laugh at the joke because it's funny. Now they have to laugh at the joke because he's the boss, because she's the boss. And if you don't laugh at the joke, there are some real consequences. Things might actually not go your way if you don't think everything they say is funny, if you deal with them like you would a normal friend. And so what you do then is you start to couch your words. You start to change your behavior. You start to perform every time you're around them. If you're a leader and you started to realize that people around you are acting a little bit different, they're laughing a little bit too hard at your jokes, they nod a little bit too hard whenever you're making a point, they write notes down because you're talking and they think that, it's amazing when you know in yourself it's actually not that great, you're experiencing the beginnings of isolation, where people are starting to change their behavior around you, not because of you, but because of the position that you're in. So isolation has a lot of negative effects on you as a leader. And oftentimes it happens subtly. It happens in ways that you don't fully understand until it's way too late. John Maxwell was fortunate because he felt it and saw it almost right away. But a lot of people, they're isolated and they don't even know it. They're so focused on their power and authority as a leader, they don't realize that everybody is behaving a little bit differently around them. And a lot of things start to happen over time that if you're not careful, you won't even notice. One of the first things that happens is power reduces honest feedback. So one of my favorite stories, you're going to love this, is of this emperor who gets new clothes. Now, you've probably heard this story before if you're old, but if you're not, you've probably never heard it. I want to tell it to you because it has a lot to do with what happens with people when they get in proximity to power and they start to change the feedback they give to the person in charge. The story of the emperor's new clothes is about this emperor who had all kinds of power in the community and all kinds of power in the kingdom. And people obviously treated him differently, but he didn't know it. One day, two swindlers show up in the kingdom, and they're basically acting like they've got the best fabric that's ever been made. It's made from exquisite animals really, really far away, and no one's ever seen the animals before, but it's the best ever. They talk to the emperor and they convince him that this fabric is the best ever, and they're going to make an amazing new garment for him based on the fabric. And so they go ahead and they pull out the fabric. All the while, there's actually nothing there, but they're acting like they're pulling out this amazing fabric, and they say, well, the truth is only people who are wise and who are smart and who are powerful can actually see this beautiful fabric. Well, the king, he looked around and he's like, man, I don't want to look like an idiot. Of course I can see the fabric. It's so beautiful. So they're pulling it out. They're like, oh my gosh. And they drop it and they pick it back up. And they're really making a big show out of it. Like, we're going to make you the greatest outfit that anyone has ever seen. It's absolutely incredible. And so they take the king and they make the outfit. And then they come back and they sort of put it on the king. First, they take all his clothes off. He's completely naked now. And they slowly put on the fabric. And they're like, this is so light. It's almost like you don't feel anything. But yet it is so beautiful. They're like, this is amazing. So they put it on and he goes in front of the mirror and he's completely naked. But he doesn't want to make it look like he doesn't understand because, shoot, only people who are super smart, super powerful can actually see this clothing. And so, people will come in like his servants and he's like, isn't this amazing? And again, his servants, they're pulling their punches. They're not telling him the truth. And so they're like, yeah, king, it is amazing. Because the king said, hey, only people who are smart and powerful, they're the ones who can see this. So they're like, oh, I don't want to look stupid either. So they're like, this looks so incredible. So then the king says, you know what? We've got a major parade coming up tomorrow. I'm going to wear this outfit. And he pays those guys a bunch of money. Those guys grab the money and they leave town. They're never coming back. So the king wakes up in the morning and he goes to where the outfit is laying and he puts it on because it's so light. You can't even feel it, right? And then he goes out in the parade. The whole kingdom is there watching the king walk down the aisle. And he's walking down the street and he's strutting his stuff, making it look like he's wearing this amazing outfit. All the while, everyone's looking around like, oh my gosh. But the truth is, nobody wants to tell him that he's wearing nothing. And so everyone's like, wow, this is amazing. So beautiful. You are so good looking. And they're applauding. And the king is like, this must be true. This is absolutely amazing. I do look great. And I am smart. And I am powerful. Everything that he believed about himself is being reinforced by all the people around him. Except for one. There's a little boy sitting behind his mom. And he peeks out from behind his mom's skirt. And he looks at the king, then he looks at everybody else, and he hears the cheers and the excitement. And then there's a moment when the king starts to move past and things get a little quiet. And the boy steps out from his mom and he points directly at the king and he's like, Mom, the emperor has no clothes on. And that's the moment that everybody snaps and realizes it's all been a lie. And people start laughing. The king is terrified. He's absolutely embarrassed. He runs back into the kingdom and he slams the door. He doesn't come out for years. Now, this is a story, but it's an illustration of what happens when people get to a position where everybody around them stops telling them the truth. This is what we mean by isolation. The further you get up in leadership, the harder it is to get people to tell you the truth. And it's something that you wouldn't realize until you got into the seat and realized it right away that people are pulling their punches. This has happened to me multiple times. When I'm leading something that I thought was very, very important and I go to try to get feedback from people, I realize that it's very, very hard to get feedback from people who aren't your peers. Because oftentimes they feel something inside about giving you negative information. So they pull their punches and they don't tell you the full truth. It's not their fault. Because I've been in situations before, people have asked me questions who are supervising me, and man, it is hard to tell the truth. But it's a reality of leadership. Now, leadership isolation doesn't happen all at once. Now, there's sort of stages to it. You can imagine yourself almost as if you are at the bottom of a mountain, right? And you've got these sort of glasses on you. And one of the things that happens over time is that as you move up the mountain, the glasses become darker and darker and darker. You're moving up, you're gaining altitude, but it becomes harder and harder to see clearly as you move up the mountain. That's what it feels like in leadership isolation. The people who are at the highest peaks of leadership very often have a very, very, very small level of visibility in regards to what's actually happening in the organization. You think because they're at the top, they're the ones that see the most. It's actually not the truth. They can see pretty far out, but they can't see what's happening in the organization because they can't get honest answers. And because this doesn't happen all at once, you know that there are subtle signals along the way to tell you whether or not you're getting the full truth from people, or there's subtle signals along the way to tell you that people are reacting to your power and not your personality. Here's two things that you'll notice right away when you start to get into a seat of power. One of two things happen. Number one, people will give you the truth, but they'll give it to you with way too much energy. They'll just throw it at you. And you're like, what did I do? Like, why are you so mad at me? Like, what? Why are you so upset? Well, the truth is, oftentimes when people are speaking to people in power, there's this idea in their mind about the value of speaking truth to power, that you're in a powerful position. And so they need to tell you the unvarnished truth, whether it hurts your feelings or not. And what happens in situations like that is it oftentimes puts you on the defensive, where you're like, whoa, well, what did I personally do? Well, you didn't personally do anything. It's your position. And as they're speaking truth to power, it turns out that you're the power and they're going to throw the truth right at you. And sometimes it stinks to be in a position like that, but that's oftentimes how people respond. Or you get the other side, where you get people who are around you and you'll ask them direct questions over and over and over again, and you can't get critical feedback. Meaning if you have people around you and they have not brought you bad news in over 6 months and you think everything is going great, it's not. They are filtering their words and they are not telling you the truth. If you have no one around you that's giving you critical feedback and everybody, again, laughs at every single joke you tell, and they write down every single word you say as if it's God's gift to humanity, you need to pause and realize, okay, this is not my personality, it's not my intellect, it's my position, and people aren't telling me the truth. Those are two signs that you know that you're leaning into leadership isolation. One of my favorite quotes on this is from two guys who write on leadership for Harvard, Kuntz and Posner. You might have read a book or two on them. One of the things that they say is, pity the leader, that's caught between uncritical lovers and unloving critics. When you're in a position where you have people who just give you the truth unvarnished, that hurts. And then you have people who refuse to tell you the truth because it's out of caring. That also hurts. That's a tough place to be as a leader. So the thing about isolation is that it doesn't just affect you professionally. I mean, now that you have this position, people look at you differently, and it does affect you professionally, but it's not just that. It affects you personally, and not always for the better. Oftentimes, when you're experiencing isolation in leadership, you start to feel this pressure to perform. People have expectations on you now that they didn't have before. And for a lot of leaders, they get into this trap of starting to segment their life. Here's what I mean by that. In leadership in general, there are two different places where you lead. There's the front stage and the backstage. Now, let me break it down. Let's say that you're in a play and you have the performance on the front stage in front of the audience. Everybody's looking at you. Everybody's seeing what you do. And then you have all the stuff that happens backstage. It's where nobody sees it, but you're still sort of doing stuff. Maybe you're getting ready for the front stage, whatever. Well, what happens to leaders is that they start to segment their leadership and they start to focus exclusively on the front stage. They think only about the meetings that they're leading or the pitches that they're giving or the salaries or the hiring or the strategy. That's all they think about in regards to their leadership. They only think about that, and that's what counts. In fact, that's where they get the applause, on the front stage. That's what matters most. And so they dedicate all of their time to that. But there's also a backstage. The backstage is what really makes you as a leader. It's your deep inner work. It's the time you take to really think about why you're leading. It's the time you take to take a big step back and look at the people who are following you and to try to figure out whether they're telling you the truth or whether they're telling you what you want to hear. It's the thoughtfulness that you put into reading good books, making sure that you have a wide breadth of experience, making sure you see new things, making sure you hear new voices, making sure you're bringing your very best self through exercise and through eating and through meditation or prayer, or whatever you do, to the front stage. But the backstage is all the work you do behind the scenes to get ready for the front stage. And the worst leaders, when they get in the moments of isolation, they focus exclusively on the front stage. They keep trying to accomplish more, to get more applause, to get more people to say good things about them. They get more sort of raises or more sort of accolades, and they stop focusing on the backstage. And the backstage is the most important element of leadership. In one 2024 study, it reported that 50% of all CEOs and executives have felt loneliness in their position. And 61% of those CEOs said that loneliness detrimentally affected their leadership. In fact, the Center for Creative Leadership has cited a bigger number. It said 76% of executives experience feelings of loneliness. That sense of isolation, that sense of being by yourself backstage, has detrimental effects. And most leaders, honestly, most leaders don't even know that they're isolated. They don't know that they're experiencing that level of loneliness. And it hits not just in, the mom and pop business that you're in or Fortune 500 company or your church or even, some smaller government levels. It hits even at the highest levels. Leaders can be isolated at any level. One of my favorite examples is from someone that you've probably heard of in a situation that you probably heard of. His name's Bill Clinton, and it's a situation that has to do with a woman that you probably heard of, Monica Lewinsky. Now, famously, in 1995, Bill Clinton had a sexual encounter with Monica Lewinsky, and you can go ahead and Google it, and you'll find out all the information about it. But one of the things you got to find is that you don't really hear about this very often. You don't hear about the reason why it happened. You see, Bill Clinton famously had a problem with women, and it dangerously got to positions where it almost ruined his gubernatorial career. And then during the presidential campaign, it came up again and again and again, and he found a way to kind of push it down. But then in 1995, there was a government shutdown. That meant that all the people, imagine all the people who are surrounding the president, all the staff, all the security guards, everybody, Secret Service, everybody around the president, in the 1995 government shutdown, a lot of those people were furloughed. The West Wing was quiet. There weren't nearly as many people there. And so what they did to keep the government running to some capacities, they brought in interns to do the job of the people who were furloughed. That means that the people who were typically protecting the president, around the president, giving the president company and support and kind of understanding who he was and why he was and what his temptations were, those people were all gone. And Hillary Clinton, she wasn't around. And the president, for the first time in his entire presidency, was isolated. And then the interns were brought in, and that's when he had the relationship with Monica Lewinsky. You see, what happens is leaders don't fully realize how bad isolation can be and how they are often one step away from unbelievable catastrophe. The decisions you make that affect your business, your family, your finances, as a leader, oftentimes happen in isolation. And when you are isolated in the backstage, that's oftentimes where your worst decisions are made. Now, isolation is the reality. When you get into leadership, you're going to find seasons when you're isolated, or you're going to find people who look at you because of your position, not your personality. And it's going to affect you. That's the reality. But it doesn't have to be an inevitability. It doesn't have to always be the case. In fact, the very best leaders have learned how to combat isolation with a very specific technique. I want to tell you about how to do it right now. So the truth is, if you're a leader that's worth your salt, one of the things that you do is you get a lot of information. You gain a lot of information. Either you're reading books, you're listening to this podcast right now, maybe if you're in a higher level leadership, you have a strategist and you have a consultant and you have people that you work with to help you think about decisions. Leaders oftentimes take their decision-making very seriously, and they spend a lot of money. In fact, leaders spend a ton of cash on strategy. But here's the thing. The very best leaders don't just have a team that's assembled for strategy. It's not just their executive team. It's not just their advisory team or consultants that they hire. They don't just have a team for strategy. They also have a team for their soul. They have people around them that they've brought close, their inner circle, to say, look, I'm going to give you the keys to my backstage. I'm going to give you the keys behind the scenes. I'm going to let you know exactly how I'm feeling. I'm not going to unfilter my thoughts. And I need you to give me your unfiltered thoughts. When I'm being a jerk, I need you to tell me. When I'm lacking courage, I need you to tell me. When I need prayer, if you're a Christian, I need you to pray for me. The people who are really leading at a high level and experiencing an unbelievable amount of success without feeling that deep sense of isolation, they've developed a team that helps shore up their soul. And for some people, they're pastors on that team. For some people, they've got great spiritual advisors. They got good friends. They have mature mentors. They have people on that team that help out. One of the things I love about what we do at Branches is that we actually focus in on that. We help people with strategy, people who are building businesses that are designed to bless and benefit their communities. We love helping with that strategy. We also take the idea of the leader's soul very seriously. And we create communities that are designed to help that leader go further, faster, because it's not all about strategy. It's not all about information. It's about how you process that information. It's about who you are becoming as a leader along the way. And we absolutely recognize that isolation is real in leadership, but it doesn't have to be inevitable. The best leaders don't find community. They forge community. They force it to happen. They make it happen. They pull people into their inner circle. They don't wander into community. They go out and they find it. And when they find people who can help them make better decisions backstage, suddenly their performance becomes better in the front stage. It all works together. I started this show telling you specifically about something that I thought you experienced that you had never heard before: isolation, loneliness, and leadership. And the reality is, a lot of you have experienced this. You've gone through it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And as I've talked about John Maxwell experiencing isolation for the very first time, even as he was accomplishing more, he was experiencing more and more isolation. I explained why it happens and why people pull back and why people don't tell you the truth. It's not their fault. It's just your position. It's really what it is. It's not something you can take personally. We've talked about the emperor's new clothes and how foolish you look when everybody's acting as if every idea you have is amazing, and it's really not. And we've even talked about how isolation can hit you in some of the most unexpected ways and some of the highest levels of leadership, as we talked about Bill Clinton. So you and I know that anybody is susceptible to this. Front stage is great. You lead at a high level in front of all your peers and your community, but the backstage, that's when isolation hits you. Now, the thing is, it's not enough to just listen to this podcast and say, well, now I know. You've got to do something about it. And for you, if you're dealing with isolation and you don't have a tribe, you don't have a community of peers, you have a strategy group, you've got people who are giving you advice on how to lead your company, but you don't have people who are giving you any sort of support on how to lead your soul, I want to encourage you. There's organizations all over the world that can help you. Branches in particular is really, really good at this and would love to help you. If you haven't gone to Branches yet and figured out how we can help you, I encourage you to go to branchesworldwide.org or go to wearebranches.com. Those two places can help you understand a little bit more about how we help CEOs, executives, and owners build businesses that bless and benefit their communities, but also at the same time, make sure that their soul is strong in the process.